You were just a woman hanging pictures on a quiet Sunday morning. That's what the neighbor thought when he passed your open window. Just another young woman with a coffee mug, arranging old photographs on a faded wall. He didn't notice the uniform in one of those frames. He didn't notice the metal-banded pager resting on the shelf above your desk, its small screen cracked, its signal light long dead. He didn't know that for 5 years, it hadn't made a sound. Until today. If you believe some callings never truly fade, even after the uniform comes off, like and subscribe, because this story will remind you why duty never retires. The morning began soft and unassuming. Isabel Salinas, Izzy, to the few who knew her, had planned nothing more than to finally finish rearranging the wall of photos she'd been avoiding since she moved in. The air smelled faintly of dust and sea salt. Her little apartment overlooked the harbor, where fog rolled over the water like quiet breath. She liked the stillness. It was predictable. It was normal. After years of chaos, the silence of her small space was the only thing that made sense. She moved one frame a few inches to the left, stepped back, squinted, and frowned. There was always one more adjustment to make, one more imperfection to correct. It wasn't about the pictures. It was about control. After what she'd been through, control was a kind of therapy. The photos told the story she didn't. A young woman in fatigues standing beside a jet, desert wind lifting her hair. A group of 7 smiling faces in front of a massive radar dish, all wearing the same insignia on their sleeves. A silver star burning behind a phoenix's wings. Starfire Unit, 7th Recon Wing. In another picture, her hand rested on the shoulder of a man whose name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. His face was sunburned and calm, his grin sharp and honest. That photo always went in the center. She didn't need to remember the details of the last mission. The memories came whether she wanted them or not. Outside, a gull screamed overhead, pulling her back to the present. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Focus, Izzy," she whispered. She pressed a strip of tape behind the frame and lifted it into place. The hammer she used to fix the nail was small, the kind you'd find in a starter toolkit, but her hands moved with the discipline of someone who'd once handled far more delicate machinery. That was the thing about service. It never really left your fingertips. Her roommate, Kayla, was still asleep down the hall, headphones probably in, lost in some playlist of late-night lo-fi beats. Izzy preferred mornings. The world felt cleaner before everyone else woke up. She turned back to the coffee table, reaching for the next frame when the sound came. A single buzz. It was soft at first, almost uncertain, like a sound from a dream. She froze, her fingers hovering midair. Then it came again, short, sharp, and impossible. Her eyes darted to the shelf above the desk. The pager. For a moment, she couldn't move. That pager had been silent since she left the Air Force. The code to activate it had been decommissioned when she was 23. Now she was 28, and the world she'd built since leaving uniform had no space for that kind of sound. And yet, it was real. The tiny screen flickered, dim green against the morning light. Letters crawled across it, shaky but unmistakable. Major Salinas. Starfire Protocol. Level red. Her breath caught. Her mug slipped from her hand, coffee spilling across the floor, dark and spreading. The pager buzzed a third time, insistent now. The light blinked like a heartbeat that had been dormant for years. Kayla's door opened. "Izzy? You okay?" Izzy didn't answer. She just stared at the pager. Her lips parted as if to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Kayla padded into the room, rubbing her eyes. "What's that sound?" When she saw the small device in Izzy's hand, her sleepy confusion deepened. "Wait, are you serious? That's a military pager, right? Why does it say Major?" Izzy finally looked up. Her face had gone pale, her expression unreadable. "Because that's what I used to be," she said quietly. Kayla blinked. "Used to be? You mean like actually?" Izzy didn't answer right away. She pressed her thumb to the pager's side button, scrolling through the coded message. A secondary line appeared. Immediate recall. Starfire command, offline. Verify last operative standing. The words landed like a ghost stepping back into the room. Izzy closed her eyes. Last operative standing. She set the pager down carefully on the counter as if it might explode, then walked to the window. The harbor looked the same. Boats rocking lazily, sunlight breaking through thin clouds. But everything in her chest shifted. The world she'd worked so hard to escape had just reached across years and silence to pull her back in. Kayla's voice broke through the stillness. Izzy, you're kind of freaking me out. What's a Starfire Protocol? Izzy's reflection in the glass didn't answer. Her jaw clenched, her breath steady but shallow. You ever lose something, she said softly, and hope it stays lost. Kayla frowned. Yeah, sure. That's what this is, Izzy murmured. She turned, her eyes different now, focused, haunted, awake. Something that should have stayed buried. The pager beeped again, and this time the screen flashed coordinates. Her throat tightened as she recognized them instantly. The old training field outside the city, the one they'd sworn would never reopen. She moved to her desk drawer, unlocked it, and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were things she'd promised herself she'd never touch again. An encrypted drive, an identification card that read MAJ, Salinas, Starfire OPS, and a single folded map. She set them on the table with slow precision. Kayla took a step closer, her voice hushed. Izzy, you're scaring me. What is this? This, Izzy said, not looking up, is supposed to be impossible. In the hallway, the old neighbor, Mr. Lang, a retired Navy mechanic who still wore his cap like a badge, was locking his door when he heard the faint beeping. He frowned, turned his head toward Izzy's apartment, and froze when he saw the light flashing through her window. His face drained of color. He'd seen one of those signals once before, decades ago, and the world hadn't been the same after. Inside, Izzy slipped the pager into her jacket pocket. The uniform was gone, but the muscle memory remained. She moved like a soldier again, decisive, silent, sure. She grabbed her keys and turned toward the door. Where are you going? Kayla asked. Izzy paused just long enough to glance back, to see if ghosts still answer calls. As the door shut behind her, Kayla stood frozen, staring at the shelf where the photos hung. The morning light caught one in particular. A younger Izzy in a flight suit, a storm of sand behind her, her hand resting on the shoulder of the same man from before. Beneath it, almost invisible, were 6 etched words burned into the frame's bottom edge. When the stars burn, we rise. The pager buzzed one last time before silence returned. And in that silence, every unanswered question hung heavy in the air. The photos on the wall looked back at the empty room, and for the first time since she'd moved in, Izzy's apartment didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the calm before history decided to knock again. The drive out of the city was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed on the chest. The harbor disappeared behind her as Isabel Salinas followed the winding coastal road toward the hills, the pager resting on the passenger seat beside her like an old friend who had returned bearing bad news. Every few minutes it flickered again, repeating the same coordinates, the same 2 words, Starfire Protocol. She had driven this road hundreds of times before, back when it led to something alive, guarded, classified. Now it led to a place the world had long since abandoned. The airfield appeared on the horizon just after dawn, a gray skeleton against the pale sky. The main gate was chained, the asphalt cracked and overgrown with weeds. The perimeter fence sagged in places where the metal had rusted through. No guards, no lights, no signs of life. Izzy parked her car near the gate, killed the engine, and sat in the silence for a long moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. Then she opened the door and stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath her boots, the same boots she hadn't worn since the day she turned them in. The wind tugged at her hair as she approached the gate. She pressed her palm against the chain link, half expecting the world to stay asleep. But then, with a faint electric click, the chain's lock released. The gate shuddered open on its own. Izzy froze. Her pager pulsed green once, as if acknowledging her presence. She walked inside, every step stirring up the dust of memory. The main hangar loomed ahead, its doors half collapsed, its interior dark. She pushed one open, the metal groaning in protest, and light spilled across the floor, revealing what remained of Starfire Command. Desks overturned, computers covered in tarps, cables coiled like forgotten veins. But at the center of the hangar, untouched by time, stood the old operations terminal, the one they used to call the heartbeat. She crossed the floor and brushed her hand across its surface. Dust rose in a faint cloud. Then, as her skin made contact, the monitor flickered. Blue light blinked to life, crawling across the terminal in lines and shapes she hadn't seen in years. A soft voice followed, female, synthetic, calm. Major Salinas, identity confirmed. Starfire Protocol engaged. Welcome back. Izzy's pulse quickened. The room around her hummed, systems powering up one by one. Old generators coughed to life, overhead lights stuttered, and for the first time in years, the insignia of the Starfire unit, silver wings framing a burning star, glowed on the far wall. "This can't be happening," she whispered. The voice responded. "Primary command offline. Satellite systems in orbital drift. Starfire chain requires manual override." Izzy gripped the console. "That's impossible. The satellites were decommissioned." "There. Incorrect." The voice cut in. "Orbital control lost following solar flare event. Current trajectory, critical." She stared at the readout. 3 blinking red nodes appeared on the holographic map, each representing a satellite that had once formed part of a global defense network. If those nodes fell out of orbit, half the hemisphere's communication grid would burn. "Who else is on this channel?" she asked, scanning for other logins. "Active operatives, 0. You are the last verified member of Starfire Command." The words hit her like a blade of cold air. The last one. She'd always known most of the team hadn't survived the last mission, but she'd never heard it said so plainly. Still, the training took over before grief could. She pulled the old data drive from her jacket, connected it to the console, and began typing commands. Her hands moved without hesitation. She remembered every code, every sequence. It was muscle memory etched into her bones. Outside, the morning fog thickened. Somewhere down the road, a pair of headlights appeared, then stopped. A local farmer in an old truck stared at the hangar, blinking as faint blue light pulsed from within. He'd driven this route for decades and never seen anything but silence here. Now, he watched the glow with the wary awe of someone witnessing a legend stir. Inside, Izzy's focus narrowed to the screen. The satellites were tumbling faster than she remembered. "I need manual uplink authorization," she said aloud. "Voice command required." She hesitated, then spoke clearly. "Salinas, Isabel. Major. Starfire ID 7125 Kappa. Authorization confirmed. Uplink granted." The holographic map expanded, filling the room with rotating constellations and data streams. Izzy began stabilizing the first satellite, her fingers flying across the keys. Her reflection glimmered against the screen. Older, sharper, but still the same woman who had once held a world together with logic and grit. Then the pager vibrated again. A new message appeared, this time on the terminal itself. "Unauthorized access detected. Starfire control restricted. Please identify." Izzy frowned. "Identify? I'm the only one left." But before she could respond, another signal appeared on the screen, an incoming connection from an encrypted military network. The voice that followed was deep, steady, and unmistakably human. "Major Salinas," it said, "you were never supposed to see this." Izzy froze. "Who is this?" "Command doesn't exist anymore," the voice replied. "But the protocol does. You triggered it. We need you to stand down." Her pulse hammered. "Stand down? The satellites are falling out of orbit. If I do nothing, the chain collapses." "That's not your concern," the voice said sharply. "You were declared inactive for a reason. Walk away." Izzy stared at the data, numbers racing, warnings flashing red. "You don't get to tell me when my duty ends." There was silence. Then the line went dead. For a long moment, only the hum of the systems filled the hangar. Izzy leaned over the console, exhaling slowly. "Fine," she muttered. "Then I do this alone." She keyed in the manual override, and the system's response tone deepened. One by one, the red nodes began to turn yellow, stabilizing. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the familiar ache of stepping back into something she thought she'd buried. Every keystroke brought back voices, laughter, the sound of jet turbines, and the final transmission from her commander, the one that had gone silent mid-sentence. By the time the last node blinked yellow, the sun had broken through the clouds outside. Light poured through the hangar windows, catching the dust in golden streaks. Izzy straightened slowly, staring at the screen. The system was holding, for now. Then, from the far side of the hangar, another monitor flickered to life on its own. Static filled the air, and an image struggled into focus, a video feed, old but live. A man's face, blurred and scarred by interference. Her breath caught. "Major Salinas," the figure said faintly. "If you're seeing this, it means Starfire isn't finished." The feed cut to black. Izzy stood alone in the sudden silence, the hum of machinery fading around her. She pressed her palm against the edge of the console, grounding herself. Outside, the wind shifted, scattering leaves across the cracked pavement. For the first time in years, she didn't feel out of place. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The hangar was quiet again, but the air felt different now. Charged, alive, as if the room itself remembered how to breathe. Isabel Salinas stood in the blue glow of the console, her reflection fractured across its polished surface. The message replayed in her head. If you're seeing this, it means Starfire isn't finished. She swallowed hard. She'd seen her commander die on a grainy feed 6 years ago. There had been no body, no rescue mission, just silence and an official report stamped, lost in operation. And yet here he was, speaking to her from the edge of the impossible. She stepped closer to the secondary terminal. The image had vanished, replaced by static and the faint hum of the old server trying to reconnect. She tried to trace the signal source, somewhere between 2 geostationary satellites, but the coordinates didn't make sense. The feed wasn't coming from orbit. It was coming from beneath. Buried relay, she murmured. Substation 31. That wasn't possible. That relay had been destroyed years ago. She had been there when the blast ripped through the valley. But the coordinates blinked insistently on the screen, a digital heartbeat refusing to die. Izzy took a breath and unplugged the drive, sliding it into her jacket. The pager buzzed again, softer this time, not urgent. Almost steady, like it was guiding her. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant waves and a faint metallic groan as one of the old antenna towers shifted against the breeze. She looked up at it, that rusted monument of steel and silence. And for a moment she saw herself as she had been, the youngest major in her unit, eyes bright with purpose, surrounded by people who had believed in something bigger than survival. She had promised herself she'd never go back. And yet every instinct in her bones said this wasn't about orders anymore. This was about keeping that promise alive, for the ones who couldn't. She crossed the hangar, heading toward the back exit. The lock disengaged automatically when she touched it. The field outside had become a graveyard of machines. Old drones, weather-beaten comm towers, and rusted launch equipment scattered like bones across the grass. The coordinates on her pager pulsed again, pointing her toward the far side of the ridge. It took nearly 20 minutes to climb through the debris. When she reached the top, she found what remained of the substation, a hatch half buried under dirt and weeds. A faint hum vibrated beneath it. She crouched, brushed away the grime, and found a metal plate marked with an insignia she hadn't seen since that final night. The phoenix and the burning star. She hesitated, then pressed her hand flat against the plate. The metal was cold at first, then warm, reacting. A faint click sounded, and the hatch released. The ground shuddered slightly as the door slid open, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness lit only by the weak glow of emergency lights. The air smelled of dust and machine oil, stale and heavy. She descended slowly, her boots echoing against the steps. Each level she passed brought back voices, the chatter of her team, laughter before takeoff, the calm certainty of command before everything fell apart. She reached the bottom, where a single door waited, sealed tight. Across its surface, faint words were stenciled in faded paint. Starfire Command, Primary Control Room. Izzy reached for the access panel. It sparked to life, scanning her face, her badge, her voice. Major Isabel Salinas, she said clearly. The light turned green. The door opened. Inside, the room was a time capsule. Consoles lined the walls, monitors covered in dust, but still humming faintly, as though waiting for someone to notice them. In the center stood a single operational terminal projecting a dim blue hologram. A figure flickered into view, grainy, but recognizable. Her commander. He looked older than she remembered, his uniform darkened by time. If you're watching this, his voice began. Then command failed to contain the flare chain. You were always the contingency, the only one authorized to restart the network. His image wavered. You'll be alone. You'll be scared. But if Starfire still responds to your call, it means hope hasn't burned out yet. The message ended there. No farewell, no explanation, just that one word that caught in her chest. Hope. Izzy stood motionless for a long time. Around her, the monitors began flickering to life, one after another. until the whole chamber glowed faintly. A low rumble vibrated through the walls. She looked up at the main screen and saw the satellites realigning, orbit stabilizing, signals reweaving themselves across the globe like threads of light pulling together. The system had reactivated because she had answered. Up on the surface, the antenna towers began to spin for the first time in years. Birds scattered as the wind from their rotation tore through the grass. Farther away, in small towns and coastal outposts, communications panels blinked awake, weather systems stabilizing, flight grids reconnecting, data links restored. No one knew why, but something unseen had brought balance back to a network the world didn't even remember existed. Back in the chamber, Izzy typed one last command into the console. The lights dimmed, the hum softened. The pager vibrated in her pocket one final time, its screen displaying a single line. Mission complete. Well done, Major. She exhaled slowly, eyes stinging but steady. Goodbye, Starfire, she whispered. Then she turned and climbed the stairs back toward the surface, each step lighter than the one before. When she reached the top, the sun was breaking through the clouds. The airfield below shimmered in golden light, and for the first time, it didn't look abandoned. It looked at peace. By evening, she was back in her apartment. The coffee stains still darkened the floor. The photos still lined the wall. She picked up the fallen frame, the one of her and her team, and hung it straight again. This time, her reflection in the glass didn't look haunted. It looked whole. She reached for the pager on her desk. The light was gone, the device dead again. She hesitated, then placed it inside a small wooden box and set it beside the photo. When she closed the lid, the room fell silent. Outside, the city lights blinked against the dusk. A neighbor passing her window saw her there and smiled faintly, unaware of the storm that had just passed above their heads. To them, she was just another woman tidying her apartment. But somewhere high above, 3 satellites aligned perfectly, forming a faint pattern visible only for a moment. A burning star between 2 silver wings. Izzy watched it through her window, a small smile forming at the corner of her mouth. When the stars burn, she whispered, we rise. And with that, she turned off the light.